Hidden Gems, Episode 47, The Lord of the Rings. Welcome to Hidden Gems, a board game podcast where we review unusual, forgotten, and underappreciated board games. We're your hosts. My name is Chris.
I'm Cameron. And I'm Cameron. Thanks for listening to our show.
What happened to Bill?
Well, Bill decided to go to the South Pole.
Literally.
This
is not a joke.
He's actually going to the South Pole.
Bill, currently, I think, is on an icebreaker ship headed to Antarctica.
Yep.
As only Bill would.
That's right.
I'm so glad that Bill is in my life because I literally know nobody else who would do something like this.
Right.
It's just so Bill doing this kind of thing.
But it's so cool.
It is so cool.
Because in order to get there, he actually had to first travel all the way to the very southern tip of South America.
Yes, the southernmost, yep.
In fact, this is actually a great transition. He sent us on WhatsApp some voice messages about his experience in Argentina and his experience on the ship.
Yes.
So without further ado, let's tune in to see what Bill's been up to.
Give us a report, Bill.
The trip has been amazing so far. I got into Buenos Aires a couple days early and went to Iguazu Falls. I took a boat trip ride that I'll have to talk to you about at some point, but it was crazy. They drove underneath the falls. It was unbelievable. The volume of water that was taking out everybody in the boat. It was very, very cool. And Buenos Aires is a nice town. Yesterday, we flew into I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong. Ushuaia, the most southern city in Argentina, where the ships leave from. And so we left yesterday at 6 p.m. and just spent the night going across Drake's Passage. And I'm on my back right now in my cabin because I'm not feeling so good. It's been windy. The wind's been coming in at 30 knots. And so the wind waves are between 15 and 20 feet tall, which is pretty significant. And then every once in a while we'll have another swell that I swear has got to be 30 feet. And I've never been in anything like it before in my life. And I was doing pretty well this morning. I'd taken the patch, kind of toured the ship, went up to the bridge. Anybody can go in the bridge anytime they want to. Observation deck. Also went to their game lounge. They have a bunch of board games here. Well, not a bunch, but a few. And I'm going to leave one from the Hidden Gems crowd, Mountain Goats. So that's going to be cool.
All right. Very good to hear from Bill. Very glad that we're actually able to communicate with him like this. Technology is amazing.
It really is.
But thanks for keeping us posted, Bill. We hope that you have a fantastic trip. We know you're listening to this episode. So thanks for sending that update along. And we wish you safe travels. And if you can stay warm, if that's possible to do when you're in Antarctica. So as Bill mentioned in the messages that he left us, there's a board game room.
Yes.
On the ship, and Bill was hitting that place up and talking about the podcast.
Yep.
And we're grateful for him plugging the show wherever he goes.
And leaving a game.
That's right.
Courtesy of Hidden Gems Mountain Goats.
That's right.
Which is a fun little dice rolling game that he said he's going to put a little note in there from the Hidden Gems crew. So if you're ever on an icebreaker ship to Antarctica, you might see a Hidden Gems approved game on the ship there. This is just so cool to me that he's doing this.
And if you're a member of the guild and you put a thumbs up next to that game, then you'll get entered to win a copy of Strasbourg.
That game is not on the list.
Oh, Mountain Goats?
No.
Oh, well, you could recommend it on the guild. And be entered to win a copy of Strasbourg.
It's a good try, yeah.
Episode 50. And we should maybe mention, this is episode 47.
That's
so
right.
I believe as of the release of this episode, that will close.
That is closing the nominations. That's right. So at this point, if you're hearing this, you can no longer make suggestions for episode 50. We're moving forward. I got to acquire these games, although I've got a pretty good idea of what the three are going to be, and I own all of them.
Amazing.
So I'm not going to have to work too hard in that regard. But yeah, hopefully you got your votes in so you could get entered in that Strasbourg drawing. And we'll announce the winner on the 50th episode.
All right. It is the banter section.
It is.
So, Chris, got anything you want to share with us?
I do indeed. There were many things I could choose from, but I had to mention this. So a couple weeks ago, we got back to our annual board game getaway.
Yes.
That we do pretty much every January. COVID kind of threw us off the tracks for a couple years, to be expected. But now we're getting back into the rhythm, and this is something that we have historically done for over 10 years, where we meet at different houses, but basically a house that sleeps a lot of guys. On this particular trip, we had 20 guys.
Amazing.
In one house, and they're all close friends. We've known each other for a long time, and we just sit around and talk about life, drink bourbon, and play a lot of board games.
That's right.
And it's just freaking fun.
It was so great.
I say it every year. It's like summer camp for adults.
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm at a summer break, summer camp, hanging out with my bros, still experiencing that even into my 40s now.
Yeah.
Which I think is important. To have those experiences.
There were at least 12 full games of Tichu played. And 6 full games of Terraforming Mars.
A lot of Terraforming Mars played.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to talk quickly about my favorite new to me game that I played at the Getaway.
Oh, awesome.
And it's a hotness game.
Okay.
So if you like this little discussion and you want to kind of get more of this, we do this in backstage quite often now, where we're reviewing or talking about newer games that we would never review on the show because they're just too well known, too popular. But I want to talk about one now, just to kind of give you a feel for how we do it. For me, my favorite new to me game was The Search for Planet X.
I know you
played this one. Yeah, I know you played it once.
Yeah.
I got to play it twice. And I have to say, I really enjoyed this one. So just quickly, to give them the credit, this was designed by Matthew O'Malley and Ben Rossett. It's currently ranked 106 on BGG.
Wow.
Which is why we could never review it.
Yeah.
It's just too popular for sure. But I can see why it's that high. I thoroughly enjoyed this game. For those of you that don't know, just very quickly, The Search for Planet X is a logic and deduction game where basically you have a sphere that's split up into 12 sections like a pie piece, and that's the night sky. In each sector or section is a heavenly body, like a comet or an asteroid, and you have to identify what heavenly body is in each sector and then make theories or guesses about that in order to score points. What's interesting about the logic here is that each heavenly body follows a certain set of rules that you can rely on, something that you know. So, for example, comets are only present in like 5 sectors. You know that. There are 2 comets, you don't know which sectors they'll be in, but you know they have to be in these 5. Whereas asteroids can be in any of the 12 sectors. There are 4, but they always come in pairs. So you know that.
Right.
And then you can ask questions to an app to try to figure out what is in every sector. So, for example, you could say, okay, in sectors 1 through 6, are there any asteroids? And it will tell you how many there are, but it will not tell you where they are.
Right.
And I thought that was really the coolest thing about this game, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too, Karen, because I know you played it. You can be very narrow in your search, but the narrower you get, unless you know something, the more risky you're being, right? If I say, are there asteroids in sector 1 and 2, I could do that, but it's very limited window. Whereas if I search 6 and hit 1, well, I found information, but it's not very specific information. So I have to learn all the things that I've learned before and start to put the pieces together. Awesome. I really, really liked this game a lot.
Yeah. I mean, we're not reviewing the game, obviously, but...
Mini review.
It took me a while to really understand how to play. And unfortunately, I think in my play, I only really understood what I was doing about the back half of the game, which was far too late to really catch up and perform well, I guess. But I did really like the way that every move that you take is essentially a time management move. The movement spaces are units of time,
right?
Basically.
It's like a rondelle. It's a circle. You're moving ahead. And
it represents essentially how much work you've done already, right? And the passage of time. How long have you been working on this problem that you're trying to solve? From a thematic standpoint, it's pretty tightly done.
Yeah.
The app is an interesting element, and there's part of me that maybe wishes that you didn't have to integrate it with an app, but I understand why, because of the doling out of individual bits of information. But I really did like the thematic elements of it and the different ways that the different heavenly bodies have their own personalities, I guess.
Yeah.
It was definitely fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. Loved it. And another thing I picked up on too is once you begin to learn the basics of the game and just how to play it, how much you can learn about the board state based on what people are asking, where people are placing their theories. That isn't necessarily public immediately, but if somebody's asking a lot about asteroids and then they put a theory down shortly after that, I'm thinking, do they think there's an asteroid right there? Right. And then you start playing off of that information, and then things start coming together until you can finally locate Planet X. Mm-hmm. Super cool. If I were to rate this on the Hidden Gem scale preliminarily, it's not a formal review, but my gut feeling right now is it's a 5 out of 6.
Wow.
For us. I think it's an excellent game. I do worry about it falling into a pattern. There's this action you can do called researching, which only costs a unit of time. You can't do it consecutively, but I found a lot of people were scanning, research, scanning, research, scanning, research. And so it kind of felt predictable in that way. But I think with the advanced game, that would be ironed out. So all that to say, I won't talk any more about it, but I think it's a really good quality game. I can see why it's in the top 200. I think it probably deserves to be there. It's good.
Cool. It's always great to have a fun find like that. You know, a lot of times you're the person that introduces games to other people. It's less common for someone to be like, here's a new game that you haven't played.
Bill
except
taught
for
me
one
that
of the
game.
Many that are on your own shelves. But
yeah, Bill taught me that one, actually.
Yeah. Very cool.
Well, what about you, man? What's new?
Man, what is new?
I already know the answer to this question, but yeah.
I have a fun announcement to make. So it's a Sunday, and on Tuesday, I will be participating in my last day of work at my job.
Yep.
Because I've resigned in order to pursue my woodworking business full time.
Yes.
So that's the goal, and that's what I'm going to do. And I've been the past couple weeks scrambling to tidy up things over at the company that I work for, and also kick things into high gear in terms of some marketing and project preparation.
Yeah.
So that I can make stuff out of wood.
Yeah, dude.
Furniture and whatever. So shameless plug, sturdyboneswoodworking.com. If you have any furniture needs, I can ship if needed. If you're in the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area, happy to chat with you about your custom project.
Yeah, dude, that's amazing.
We're excited. I know my wife is listening. We would not be doing this without her encouragement and without her insistence that we do it so that I can have this experience of doing what I love and doing what I feel like I'm sort of made for.
Yeah.
So
awesome, man.
That's
Congrats,
definitely my
dude.
big news. My other piece that I wanted to talk about, and this will help get us over to where we're going, is that I've restarted listening to The Lord of the Rings on audiobook.
Oh, yeah. You do this yearly, right?
I do it every year.
Yeah, I thought so, yeah.
This is my third time doing it. I decided 3 years ago that I wanted to do it every year when I was listening to the audiobooks for the first time. And the reason that I was like, I could listen to these again is because the quintessential recording that I think anybody who's going to listen to The Lord of the Rings on an audiobook should listen to is narrated by Rob Inglis. I think it's Rob Inglis or Robert Inglis, Inglis. It's so good. His reading is just so good. He does the voices for all the different characters. And one of the things that I enjoy most is that he sings the songs. He actually makes up tunes to go with the song and the meter of the songs. I think it's just great.
Yeah.
One of the things that can be difficult, especially at the beginning of The Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of songs and poetry.
Oh, there are a ton. Yeah.
There's a ton, and they're long. And so anytime that I read the books, just reading the paper copies, I always found it difficult to get through and make sense of all of the poetry and the songs. Listening to him read them and sing them, I find it brings it all to life.
I totally agree.
So I highly recommend, if you want to get through Lord of the Rings and you're having trouble reading it, get Audible, get the Robert Inglis recording of Lord of the Rings. It's so good. Right now, I'm in the Fellowship of the Ring, and they're at Weathertop, and Frodo has just gotten stabbed.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, Frodo got stabbed.
Morgul Blade.
Yeah, that's right. That's where I'm at, and it's just been a blast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I wanted to give an example of the singing.
Okay.
So
as only you could.
This is from when they're in the Barrow Downs, and Tom Bombadil has taught them how to call him to come and help if they're in need. And it goes, "Ho, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood, and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us." Woo! Yes. So it's
That's awesome.
It's
you
so
gonna put some
good.
music behind that?
Maybe.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying about reading the songs. I had the same experience. I was just not quite sure how it was supposed to sound. And then most recently in Rings of Power, which we may or may not talk about in a little bit as well. At the very end of the show, they sing the song about 3 for the Elven Kings and then 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their halls. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who sings it, but she sings that song at the end of the series. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, yeah, I think that's what Tolkien was thinking it would sound like when he wrote the words. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's just so neat to hear it performed.
It's really cool. If you're an Audible person, check that out.
Awesome.
Well, should we have a cocktail?
Maybe.
There's not a cocktail here.
There is not a cocktail here.
Are we going to have a cocktail?
Play some Elvish music in the background. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay.
Not a cocktail.
This is not a cocktail.
I know you just had Domino's pizza.
Yeah.
So I know you're not hungry. That's just for a taste.
Yeah.
So as it turns out, I'm still deciding how long I'm going to go with this. But right now I am on a keto diet, trying to cut a little bit. So I'm not eating anything with any kind of sugars, like liqueurs or fruit juices or anything like that. So it's like, what am I going to do for a cocktail?
Yeah.
So I remember when we did the episode with Burgoo.
Yeah.
I made burgoo.
Uh-huh.
So this time I made a stew, but not just any stew. This is rabbit stew.
Oh my gosh. Wait, no.
It is.
Where did you get rabbit?
It's not my rabbits. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, I'm the proud owner of 4 Holland Lot bunnies that I love dearly. And to be honest, it was hard for me to make this dish because the whole time I was thinking about them. But rabbit is a delicious meat. Actually, it tastes a lot like chicken, honestly. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking of the scene where Frodo and Sam are traveling with Gollum.
Yeah.
And he gets the rabbits and he's eating them raw.
What's this, precious?
Stupid fat hobbit.
Stupid fat hobbits.
So I thought I'd make some rabbit stew for you tonight. Just a little taste.
It's delicious.
Just for you to enjoy.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
It's actually very easy to make. I made it in a crock pot, actually. In a crock pot, put some onions, carrots, and potatoes, and then put about a cup of beef broth in the bottom with the meat and just let it cook on low for 8 hours. It will be great.
That's amazing.
It will fall apart.
Yeah.
And a little bit of warning, too. You got to be careful when you eat this because the bones, they're very small.
Okay.
And so I very painstakingly try to remove all of them. But
okay.
You got to watch out for that.
Hilarious.
But it is quite good.
You have to tell me where you got the rabbit. You don't have to say it on the show if you don't want to.
You know, my wife got it from somewhere. I think my in-laws gave it to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how much on the market rabbit there is. Are there wild game? I guess there are wild game markets.
Yeah, we got it
somewhere.
from some butcher shop.
Nice.
In all seriousness, I love my rabbits.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever talked about the bunnies.
I don't think you have on the show. I don't think people know that they're your pets.
Dude, I love these rabbits.
I love them so much.
I think I love them more than any pet I've ever owned in my life. They are awesome pets. They sit in my lap on the couch while I'm like watching TV, and they just chill there. They're the ones with the floppy ears.
Yeah.
You know? Super cute.
My brother and his wife had a rabbit for, I want to say something like 8 years. His name was Quinley.
They live a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they run around and have a space.
Yeah, he would just run around, but they would give him just toss a little carrot on the floor and he would sit there and chomp on it.
Yeah, they're awesome.
It's great. I wish I could like them more than I do, but I'm very allergic to them.
Allergies, yeah. Yeah. Only for eating. All right, man.
Dude, this is great.
We've bantered long enough. We got to leave us enough time. It's time.
Yeah.
So ever since we've done the show and we talked about themed episodes, I knew this one was coming.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know your love for Lord of the Rings. So I thought close out our banter section, we can just talk a little bit about Lord of the Rings, why we love it, why it's important to us. I think it'd be a good way to end it.
Perfect. And a mouthful of rabbit stew. Let's do this.
You start, man.
Okay. I just told Chris this anecdote, but I want to tell everybody else. I remember the exact moment that I learned about Lord of the Rings the first time.
Me too.
I was 15 years old. I was staying at my friend James's house, and he's like, hey, we just downloaded Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, on Kazaa. Do you want to watch it on the computer? So me and my 3 buddies were hanging out, having a sleepover, watching this 3-hour-long movie in front of like a 12-inch CRT monitor screen from a pirated version of Lord of the Rings.
Early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah. crowded around sitting in chairs. It was not the coziest watch that I've ever had, but it was life-changing.
Yeah. For me, I discovered and started perusing through the books actually in my college library.
Really?
So I used to study down in the stacks of my college library where nobody was. Okay. Way deep down, basement level.
Then you looked up and you were like, oh, the Mines of Moria. That's where I am.
Well, exactly, right? So I'd be down there for hours because I was on the pre-med track. I studied a lot. And I mean, I would be down there for 4 or 5 hours at a time sometime. Wow. And you get bored after a while. And I would get up and just start walking through the stacks.
Okay.
And I remember about that time the movie came out and I went through the stacks and I found The Hobbit, actually. Okay. And I remember flipping through some pages. I would read like a paragraph or two, and then I would put it back and start studying again. And I found that I just stopped studying. I kept going back to the book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember I started in Mirkwood.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I remember the title of the chapter.
Okay.
Something about spiders. I can't remember the exact title, but I remember it kind of grabbed me. And then at that point, I acquired the book and just devoured it.
Okay.
Because it just spoke to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what is it about Lord of the Rings or that genre that just grabbed you so intensely?
It's a great question. I think obviously up until that point, I had been involved in things that were fantasy related, like the Final Fantasy video games and stuff like that. Stuff with swords and whatnot had always attracted me for whatever reason. I think what made Lord of the Rings so compelling is just how fully the world is developed. Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then how old everything seems, right?
Yeah.
When you start getting into...
Like it actually has a history.
Yeah, it's just so well developed.
Yeah.
And when you're that age that I was, 15, 16, you're just starting to, I think, develop that mental shift into understanding deep and complex things. Mm-hmm. And it was just a timing thing for me.
Just hit you at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always interested to hear people talk about that period in their life. And it's funny you mentioned Final Fantasy, specifically for me, Final Fantasy 7, because I was around 15 when that one came out. And there's just something about that age range, that 15 to 18, where you experience things with such excitement and such zeal and such passion that you can never recapture it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Getting back to your original point, too, about how fleshed out the world is, one of the things that impressed me about it, I love maps. Fantasy maps. When you and I used to play D&D a lot, I used to draw my own maps. Do you remember that?
Yeah. It's the first thing I did when I made our homebrew campaign.
It's so fun to create your own continent and think about what are these people doing over here? What are these people like? What's the geography? Yeah. What does the landscape look like? And I always remember looking at maps of Middle Earth, and I always got fixated on parts that weren't part of the central story. You know what I mean?
What's going on there?
Like, what do those people do over there? Do they even know what's going on?
That's right.
In the grand scheme of things, or are they just kind of doing their own thing? Is there a kingdom there, like Rune or something? You know, it's like way on the east side. What's so cool about Tolkien is if you dig deep enough, he'll tell you what's going on in all of those places. Right? Which I think is
at least at a high level, which is what the Silmarillion is about.
Exactly, which I know you're very familiar with.
It's so impressive. That's his life's work. And how many people has his life's work touched, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe transformed their lives.
I know it has
impacted
mine
their lives.
and my kids. You know, we read through The Hobbit together, and that was a precious thing for us. You know,
it was
seeing
precious.
them. That's right. No pun intended. Because they're only 10 and 12, beginning to wrap their head around what an adventure looks like.
Yeah,
walking out the door into the unknown, and then taking these perils on, and
it's dangerous business, Frodo.
That's right. Walking out your door. Yeah, it's awesome. Love it.
Very cool. Well,
we intended to talk about Rings of Power tonight.
I think we're going to have to save it.
Too long.
I think so.
We will save it. I definitely have thoughts about Rings of Power.
I do too. And I actually had just had a conversation with a guy from my D&D group. I'm actually playing D&D again. I think we were talking about that this past Friday. So shout out to Adam. He and I were chatting about Rings of Power. Yeah. And I was like, this is great because I needed a refresher because we're going to talk about it on the show and we didn't get to it. So we'll save it for another time. There's much to consider.
There is a lot to talk about.
All right. Well, you want to get into the games then?
Yeah, we've talked long enough. Let's get into the reviews.
Sweet. The old king is dying without an heir, and the country is in turmoil. 4 lords have come to the capital city, each claiming to be the king's rightful successor. Now, the lords are vying for control of the city, For they know that whoever wins the city will win the throne.
Nice. It's a new one. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Kingsgate, also known as, forgive me, Der der Ringe, de Gefharten, das Kartenspiel. Or, I believe, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship, the card game.
The Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, Fellowship of the Ring, the card game. So, Kingsgate, the game that we played, is not Lord of the Rings themed, but it's the only one I could get my hands on. But it is basically a direct reprint with a retheme of a Lord of the Rings game, which was a Spiel nominee in 2001.
There we go.
Designed by none other than Dr. Rainer Knizia. So, as I said, published in, Kingsgate in 2002, Der der Ringe 2001. Publisher of this game, Fantasy Flight Games. At the time of this recording, Kingsgate's BGG ranking is 5,290. Der Ringe, 10,922.
Oh my gosh.
22.
Wow.
Yeah. Wild, right?
Yeah, that is crazy.
Spiel nominee.
Yeah.
Almost 11,000.
And it was nominated under the German title.
Yes, correct.
Wow.
Correct. All right, brief rules summary for Kingsgate. Kingsgate is a tile laying area control game where the players are trying to establish dominance around important locations in the city in order to score victory points. In Kingsgate, each player gets a pile of 22 square district tiles in their player color. These tiles can be numbered anywhere from 1 up to 5, while one tile has a picture of a pub on it and another has a picture of a dragon. The numbers on the tiles are important in that is how much influence that tile exerts upon a given city location if it is adjacent to it. The city locations are rectangular in shape and consist of 10 tiles, which are stacked in order from 1 down to number 10. Each city location has a set of 3 different numbers on it, which details how many victory points the first, second, and third place players will get at that location when a scoring occurs. At the start of the game, the number 1 city location, so the one on top of the 10 tiles, is placed in the center of the board, and then players randomly draw 6 of their square district tiles. On a player's turn, they can place a single one of their district tiles numbered 2 to 5 adjacent to the active city location, or they can play as many one-value district tiles as they like adjacent to the active location. In addition, they can always play their one pub and or a dragon tile with their other played tiles. The pub is worth 0 points but takes up a spot next to the location, which is helpful for enclosures, which we'll talk about in a minute, while the dragon lets a player remove another player's previously placed tile. At the end of a player's turn, once they've placed their tiles, they'll draw back up to a total of 6 tiles in their hand. It should be noted that some city locations are safe while others are dangerous. At dangerous locations, players can play tiles directly on top of opponents' tiles if the value of the played tile exceeds the value of the previously placed tile, with one exception, the number 3 value tiles, which are barracks, and they can never be played on top of or attacked by the dragon. Once the city location is completely surrounded by tiles, so this will be 10 tiles placed around the location, it is scored. The players will sum the values of all their placed tiles adjacent to the location, and then players will get first, second, and third place points accordingly from highest sum value to lowest sum value. But maybe even more important than that, and I would definitely get this part. Once the active location is scored, the player that placed the tile that caused the scoring to occur takes the next city location tile in the stack and gets to add it to the display wherever they want. So when they take that next location out, which will be active, they can place it adjacent to their previously placed tiles in such a way that they have somewhat of an advantage when we go into the tile placement for that particular location. Lastly, we should explain the character tokens. In some city locations, the player who wins first place will also acquire a character token. These character tokens are important because when played with a tile, they protect that tile from being destroyed or manipulated for the rest of the game. Also, each character has a certain benefit or ability that will help the player when the token is played. So, for example, the Guildmaster, when played with a district tile, adds 2 to the value of that tile. So a 4-value tile becomes a 6-value tile, basically. Every character has their own unique, very significant character abilities. Play will continue on like this until the 10th location is scored or the players are out of tiles. At this point, the player with the most victory points wins the game. That's generally how you play King's Gate.
That's exactly how you play King's Gate.
Pretty good.
That was thorough.
I got through most of it.
You did it, yeah.
Some of these rules will not be thorough because some of them are very long, but this one I could get through. All right, so for this one, I think a good place to start. Unfortunately, I can't ask you as much as I would like to how much you felt like this game evoked Lord of the Rings feeling, because while it is medieval themed with maybe a touch of fantasy, it's not really Lord of the Rings. So we really can't go there on this one. So I guess we have to talk about mechanisms, but don't worry, theme's coming. The other 2 reviews. Tile laying area control. Not totally unique, but not totally common either. You know, usually when we talk about area control, we think about miniatures, dudes on a map, throwing dice, modifiers, stuff like that. This one is not that way. You're placing a tile next to a location. It's got a static number on it, and you're jockeying with your opponents to try to get the upper hand, to get those points or maybe get that character token that you need. How do you feel like that played out in this game?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it's a unique approach to area control, because you're having to establish dominance while balancing the availability of what's in your hand.
Yes. And the
on
threats.
A given turn. Right.
Getting
the
covered
threats,
up.
The threats of the characters, the threats of the security of the location that you're currently placing around.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky for sure. You can place a 4 or even your highest value tile, a 5 tile out there and really say, you know what? I'm going to put my 5 out here and say, I'm making a strong run for this, but that can get destroyed. With a dragon, right? Somebody can just drag in your 5, and now you went from a position of power to not very much power at all, right? So you need to be aware that there are threats there. So you're constantly balancing, am I going to get dragon? Have dragons been played yet? Everybody only has 1. It's not chaos, okay? I don't want it to sound like it's chaotic mess, but there are just certain things you have to consider. Or do you just go safe? Do I play the 3? 3 can't be destroyed.
Sure.
3 can't be covered up, but it's kind of middling, you know, it's kind of middle of the road. There's definitely some interesting tension there in trying to figure out what am I going to lay down? Or in some cases, and we talked about this after some of our plays, when do you just let a location go? You know, you can't win everything in this game.
Yeah.
I think that's one important thing to understand is you're not going to get first place everywhere. You're not going to get first or second place everywhere. Some places you're going to come in last. Where do I need to say, you know what? It's just not lining up for me. I'm going to save these tiles and strike later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of the game. As I said, you're only dealing with, I think it's like either 5 or 6 tiles at a time.
6 tiles.
You're drawing back up to 6.
Yep.
You really do have to try to position yourself so that maybe you have some type of an advantage when the round begins, maybe because you were able to close out the previous one and you can put that thing next to where you've already got numbers, or maybe your hand setup for the next turn will allow you to really strike a hard blow to your opponents right on that round and really just lay down exactly what you need. Now you've got your dragon and you can take out someone else's big number that they were leaning on, right? I think that's a really important element of the game.
Totally agree. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned enclosures. I think we need to focus upon this because I think this is probably the thing that you and I and Brandon, who we played with, our buddy Brandon Goodman, we talked about this probably the most. Because whoever's the last person to place that tile next to the location, again, gets incredible power in determining where the next location goes, and they're always going to place it in a place where they already have a lot of their tile and start with a big advantage, right? And it could be perceived that maybe that's a turn order thing. If the turn order is not falling right, I'm just never the person that's going to be able to close it out. But I do like that Knizia, in his infinite wisdom, came up with this really cool idea of taking the least valuable tile, the ones that seem like the least important, and you can play as many of those from your hand as you want.
Yep.
So let's say I've got 4 ones in my rack. That's only 4 total strength. And let's say there are only 4 spots left to be played next to a location. I can play all 4 of those tiles down at one time.
Be the one to close it out.
And close it out. Even if I don't win first or even second place.
Right.
I may be willing to do that just to give myself the ability to take the initiative, take that location tile that I really care about, plop it down next to my high numbers, and start off with a really good jump start on that spot.
Or maybe right next to all those ones you just laid down.
Right, exactly. And now I'm ahead in that location. I really liked setting your hand up for those situations. How did you feel about that? Because I know we talked a lot about turn order and things when we played it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I would feel a lot better about if I had actually ever used it to some clever effect. But on the other hand, I understand it, and I saw it done really well by some people at this conversation. And it is really cool when you see it happen, unless you're the person that is losing the game significantly because they did that to you.
Right.
But yeah, I can see it's a really interesting balancing mechanism, right? Because you would think, well, the most valuable tiles in your hand are the 4s and 5s and maybe the dragon, right? Because those are the most powerful and the mean ones.
Yeah.
But the ones are so important.
So important.
They're so important that, I mean, if you're not tracking how many of your ones you've seen or how many of your ones you've used, or for that matter, how many of the ones your opponents have seen and used, there's a counting mechanism that you have to participate in, or you're probably not going to do very well.
Yeah.
Because they are that important.
Very important.
I would say the other thing that's really significant, since being the person to close it out is so important, what can you do to shift turn order? The fact that someone could play from 1 to 3 tiles with the ones, turn order is not necessarily set.
Not at all. Yep.
But there's another way in which it's not necessarily set, which is that turn order shifts anytime you're on a black location and someone plays over top of someone else. Right. That can shift the turn order. Because what I found myself doing, at least, is going, okay, Brandon and then Chris and then me and then Brandon and then Chris. Crap, Chris is going to get to close it out again, right? And now
I have to do something to change that.
And so you have to think, okay, well, I don't want to cover up, but if I cover it up, then it shifts it, and then maybe it'll come back to me if someone doesn't play 2 1s or something like that.
Totally.
Right.
Yep.
And you start playing that game in your head, and you have to do that in this game. You can't play from turn to turn in this game. You have to play 4 to 6 turns ahead.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, you know?
Yeah. That's awesome. So things you didn't like. I think we have to talk about the components a little bit here.
Yeah.
Right?
The original version of this game, I believe, was cards.
Yes.
Like full size,
poker cards.
Poker sized cards, which would have just taken up so much room on the table.
Table hog. I've seen pictures of it. It's absurd. Right. I mean, it takes up more space than terraforming Mars. I mean, this simple of a game like this.
Because you could potentially have up to 10 locations on the board, depending on how the game goes. And that's a lot of area.
Yes.
So the components that we were playing with in this game, I think they're roughly 2-inch square tiles, something like that.
Yep.
So area-wise, the tiles don't take up that much space, but you're handling them like a deck of cards, right? Which is pretty cumbersome when you're needing to fan your hand out and look at it all and make some decisions, right? What we ended up doing is, I don't remember which game you got them from, but we got some little trays, like
Memoir 44
Scrabble trays,
right? Little tile racks.
To basically rack everything up and spread it out so we could all see it. I think if the game included that component as a given, it would make a big difference.
You don't want to be holding a pile, even if it's just 6. It feels like a pile of cardboard square chips. It's hard to shuffle through them. It's hard to see what you got. You want to lay them out, but you don't want your opponents to see what you have. It's clumsy.
Yeah.
So having those little tile racks that I took out of Memoir 44 was really nice, just to be able to set them all in there and be able to see what you got and just play from the rack.
Yeah.
This game was made in 2001, so I get why they didn't do it. I mean, the production quality back then was just not as high, but it is annoying. Another thing that I have to mention is the lack of a player aid and some really important iconography on some tiles. You mentioned there are a couple locations that are special, and a couple of times we were playing and we're like, oh, shoot, this is that location where this applies. But the location gives you no indication.
You have to just remember.
You just have to remember it's number 6. Number 6, this special thing happens.
Yeah.
And it's not indicated anywhere on there.
And so sometimes we would forget, or someone would forget, make a bunch of decisions and plays, and then someone else wouldn't forget, and they're going, oh yeah, no, it's this special thing.
Yeah, I can do this thing. And you're like, oh,
and you're like, oh, well, I would have done that differently, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, huge miss there. That's something they could have fixed.
Sure.
Not to mention understanding what
especially
the characters
since it was a reprint.
Exactly, right. So a bit of a miss on the components. One other thing that I worry about slightly in this game, and I think we did see it in our games, is I do have possible concerns that this game can get away from a player if they find themselves out of it in the first like 3 locations.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is, and we haven't talked a lot about the special characters, but they are powerful.
Right.
And they are available early. And when you get one, it just gives you a lot of strength to be able to do things on future locations. And if you find yourself on the outside looking in and not able to get your hands on those, I think it can kind of snowball away from you and into the hands of the people that were able to get those earlier.
Yeah.
And maybe make it not as fun of an experience for that person who just can't get a hold of them early, and it can be hard to recover.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Especially considering that if you're already a bit behind and then you get to the location that's like, if you're the last person, you get -3 points. It's just like,
right.
Yeah. And we're just going to kick you, in the ribs while you're already down. I know how that feels because it happened twice.
The jousting grounds or the battlegrounds. Yeah. But I will say to his credit, it is counterbalanced a little bit in that the locations that do not give character tokens are worth a lot more points. So you could really reach for those character tokens because you think they're important, and I think they are. But the other locations just score you a crap ton of points, right? So there is considerations there.
That's right.
I'm not saying I think it's imbalanced. It's just an observation I made. I would call it a very minor possible problem, but not something that really bothered me significantly.
And the other thing that's important too is with those characters, once again, the player aid would be helpful because we found ourselves going, what does the wizard do?
You know? Right. Yeah, totally.
But you do still have to use the characters to great effect, right?
Yes.
It's very possible to play one of those at just the absolute wrong time so that it has basically minimal impact or no impact.
Yes, totally agree. And then sometimes can seem overwhelmingly powerful.
Yeah.
The bishop.
You played it back to back.
At times can just crush. So the bishop basically, when he's played, he makes every tile adjacent to the active location worth 1. And so it's not value of tiles next to that location, it's just number of tiles.
Right.
And if somebody is going heavy in there, playing 4s and 5s, and somebody plays that bishop on that location, that is a backbreaker.
Right.
I mean, it is a backbreaker for sure.
There was definitely one turn you played it a number of cards in a row.
Yep.
And then
closed it out. And
then on your very next turn, you just placed the new location right on the other side of that row
adjacent to
of
it
your
again.
Cards, which immediately turned it into, this is just the quantity of cards, which you already had 3.
Yes, right.
It was a clever play, and it was a huge swing.
It is.
Because like we were saying, being able to place that location, it's
key.
like you get a head start.
Yep.
Basically, you start with a handicap, essentially.
But again, I would say, before we go into final thoughts, not insurmountable, because if that location I placed is dangerous, and I've got a row of 1s there, and my opponents are like, Chris is running away with this one, I can just start to get covered up right? So
that's right.
There is counterbalancing there, but I don't know, just cool things to consider in this game.
Sure.
All right, man. You ready to wrap it up?
I think so.
All right. Why don't you kick us off? What do you think? Final thoughts?
Yeah. So this is one of those games that I'm going to have to say sort of split thoughts, right? Because
one of Cameron's favorite split reviews.
Because I'm a game reviewer, okay? I know what a well-designed game looks like, okay? I know when I'm seeing things that are well done, that provide things that we look for to give points to when they execute them, right? So, for example, tension.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah.
Hard decisions. We enjoy those things. And that's not just a you thing, right? I enjoy games
we all
when
do
it's not obvious what I'm going to do on my turn. And I have to sit there and think and consider and manage multiple things, right? My card, my hand, my deck, all that kind of stuff. When I'm having to look at my opponent and determine and guess what are they trying to do. So I think it's got a lot of those elements that I appreciate and that I can respect. But I always have to ask that, is it fun?
Yeah.
Thing? And I don't just land here. I think I've thought about this. I don't think I just land here because I got walloped both times that I played this game, right? For me, making all those tense, difficult decisions, it wasn't even rewarding, even when I succeeded, right? It was just kind of like, okay, all right, all done. And for me, I like when there's at least some theme like really sprinkled in, and I feel like
it's
this
pretty
was
dry.
Yeah, so I struggled to actually like it and enjoy the game, I guess. All that said, I think it gets positive points for the mechanisms that it brings to the table. But because of the, I don't know.
The way it made you feel when we were playing it?
Yeah, like I've got to land on a 3.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that actually segues really nicely into my final thought. So I would tell you all to start, be warned.
It's mean.
This game has a lot of player interaction, and there can be a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth when this game is being played and when this game is over. Because, man, you can just get your stuff snatched out from under you. You can get sniped. That location you thought you were going to win, you're not winning it anymore. And, oh, by the way, I'm enclosing it, and I'm putting it way over here where you don't want it.
Yeah.
We talked after we played this game the other night for like 45 minutes to an hour about this game.
We did.
I see that as a good thing when things like that happen, but we just had a lot of thoughts, and there was a lot of angst about a lot of that, this vicious interaction. But that's area control.
Yeah.
Area control is that way, when you can lose your stuff and people take your stuff. But the thing I liked about this one and what really saves this game for me and turns it not only a good game, what I think is an excellent game, is the hand management aspect of how you can wrestle control back into your favor with a storing up of those ones and that pub tile and making that precise surgical strike, closing an area off, even if you're maybe not scoring a lot of points, to where you can drop it in an area where you can start to benefit and get the ball rolling in your direction. I really enjoyed that hand management of, do I just play a 2 here and say the heck with it and just try to set up for something else? Or do I keep fighting here? Maybe I can pull out something, get at least second place here, score some points. Love that stuff. Add on top of that, the character tokens that open up all sorts of interesting strategic and tactical strategies. I'm loving it. So for me, this one was a 5. Games like this just speak to me. I think they're really fun. Way better than being almost 6,000 in BGG. That's nutty to me. This game, in my opinion, is a hidden gem. I think a lot of people probably haven't played this one. I think a lot of people may not like it because it is mean. Yeah. But if you don't mind that and you like that confrontational area control style, check this game out. It surprised me. I liked it.
Cool. All right. So for folks who, I mean, let's be honest, probably would appreciate your opinion more anyway than mine. And they want to check it out and they don't feel meh about this
Check
review.
It out.
Where can folks try to find it?
Yeah, so specifically for King's Gate, at least, unfortunately, there are no copies on Noble Knight, which is a shame because when I got mine, I got it from Noble Knight. So some people have picked up a few before we release the podcast. There are 9 copies on BGG, and they're around $10.
Okay.
So they're very cheap. You can get it on BGG pretty easy. There just aren't a lot there. So if you liked what you heard, you might want to try to jump on it before other people grab it. But yeah, very affordable.
Okay. Very cool.
All right. Those are our thoughts on King's Gate.
I will take the ring, he said, though I do not know the way. Elrond raised his eyes and looked at him. This is the hour of the Shire folk, when they arise from their quiet fields to shake the towers and councils of the great. Who of all the wise could have foreseen it? In The Lord of the Rings, set forth on the quest to see the One Ring destroyed. Become a hobbit and travel with your compatriots through the deadly mines of Moria, the citadel at Helm's Deep, all culminating in a desperate race to destroy the One Ring in the blighted lands of Mordor. Along the way, you will encounter famous heroes, powerful relics, and call upon the might of the wizard Gandalf. Do you possess the will to resist the corruption of the ring? Find out when you play The Lord of the Rings.
Don't tempt me, Frodo.
Don't tempt me, Frodo.
Nice. The Lord of the Rings. That's it. That's the title.
Yep. The Lord of the Rings.
The Lord of the Rings. Although most people, when they reference this game, they say The Lord of the Rings, the cooperative game.
Oh, okay.
So people actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, this is Lord of the Rings, the cooperative game, published in 2000, 23 years ago. Crazy. By Fantasy Flight Games, Cosmos, and many others. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 1015.
Okay.
Designer, Reiner Knizia. This is not a Reiner Knizia episode,
this
folks.
This is not Knizia 4. We're not there yet.
Yeah, but he designed this one as well. Much higher rated than Kingsgate. Will we like it more than Kingsgate? We shall see. All right. Brief rule summary for Lord of the Rings. Still eating that rabbit over there?
Still eating this rabbit.
In the Lord of the Rings cooperative game, the players take on the role of the hobbits and are striving to cast the Ring of Power into the fires of Mount Doom before the Eye of Sauron captures them. The overarching narrative story of the game is captured on the master game board. On this board, the players begin in the Shire, and then their marker will progress to different locations along a linear path, ending at their final destination of Mordor. Some of these locations, such as the Shire or Rivendell, are safe havens, where the players will draw cards and prepare their hands for conflict areas, such as Moria and Shelob's Lair, where they will play their cards to advance through the conflict. Also on the master game board is the corruption track. On one end of the corruption track is the Eye of Sauron. On the other end of the corruption track are the hobbits. Certain events and actions will cause the hobbits to become corrupted and move towards Sauron, while other events will cause Sauron to move ever closer to the hobbits. If Sauron ever enters the same space as a hobbit, that hobbit is defeated. If that hobbit is the ring bearer, and it's important to note that the ring can be passed between the hobbits in the game, but if the ring bearer is captured by Sauron, the game is immediately lost. Now, let's talk about the conflict boards, as this is where most of the action occurs in the game. Each conflict board consists of at least 3 tracks, the main central activity track, and then some shorter side tracks. If the characters are able to advance the activity marker all the way to the end of the main track, the characters win the conflict and advance forward in the game. The activity markers are moved along the different tracks via the playing of cards. Cards come in 2 colors, brown and gray, and can have one of 4 unique symbols on them, or they can be wild cards. Each track in the conflict also has a corresponding symbol associated with it. I'll try to explain a little bit better. So there's a fighting symbol, cross swords. You have cards that have cross swords on them. That's it, that symbol. And then there are some tracks in the conflicts that may have a cross sword on that particular track. If you want to advance that marker on that track, you have to play cards from your hand that have cross swords that match that track. On your turn, you can play 2 cards from your hand, but very importantly, they have to be of differing colors, gray and brown. All right, so while traveling along these paths, the players will also pick up rune tokens, which can be used to summon Gandalf via the use of special cards to help them when they are in particularly tricky or perilous situations. The players will also have helpful green-colored legendary cards that they will have acquired in safe havens, which they can play at any time on any player's turn. Very helpful. Now, I've saved the worst for last. It should be noted that at the start of each player's turn, they must draw a story tile, blind, from a pile of tokens. About half of these tokens are good and allow the player to move along a conflict activity track and start their turn, while the other half are bad. These bad story tiles force the players to discard cards, roll the threat die, and have other various ill effects. And even worse still, they must draw a story tile again. And if it is also bad, resolve those ill effects as well, and they will continue to draw until they have drawn a good tile. Play will continue on in this way until either the players have either been defeated or they have reached Mount Doom at the end of the main activity track in Mordor. Once this happens, the surviving players must roll the threat die one final time. If any of them survive the roll, the ring is destroyed, and the players win the game. I wonder what that feels like. And that's generally how you play Lord of the Rings, the cooperative game. All right. Lord of the Rings theme. Here we go. We're back. Woo. How well, Cameron, do you feel like this game captured the Lord of the Rings feel?
Okay. This game did an amazing job.
Okay.
With the theme, in my opinion. For one, I shout out to Frediger Bolger, because I think this is his only appearance outside of the actual books.
Are you talking about Fatty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fatty Bolger is a playable character in a game.
That is pretty awesome, actually.
I love that. You always know the person who's coming to the game who doesn't know anything about Lord of the Rings when there's like, who's Fatty Bulger? Because he's not in the movies. I think this game did a great job. You're looking at this map, this trail at the top of the game board that tracks your very high level progress.
Yeah, all three books. Yeah, the entirety of the story.
And the milestones that hobbits in particular move throughout the story. You do basically these deep dives. There's some places where you just pass through them. It's just like kind of a upkeep sort of a thing.
Yeah, safe havens. You get cards and good stuff. You get cards,
some things happen. But then you go and you basically have these encounters, and the encounters are in like really significant story places, right? The Mines of Moria, Helm's Deep, Shelob's Lair.
Yep.
And significantly, those are 3 areas that are the main sort of locales of conflict
for the hobbits
in the stories. And in the midst of the conflicts, you're talking about those 3 different tracks, the walking track or the battle track. You'll hit certain bubbles on those tracks, and it'll be like you get the Riders of Rohan card, right? And it's like
who are in that.
It's like that's the moment where the characters in the story are meeting those characters in the story, and now they're joining your party, right? By virtue of you getting that card into your hand. And there are cards that have double swords. I could say more, but I thought he did a very good job marrying the mechanisms with the narrative of the game.
I agree with that. And I would add 2 additional things. There are a lot of things to pick up on here. This game does the best job at making the ring feel like the ring.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So when you put the ring on, it actually fits around your standee. So you're wearing the ring. But what it lets you do is you become invisible.
Right.
So your activity token can move through spaces along a conflict track, because not all of them are good. Some of them will hurt you, like they'll make you roll the threat die, and you become invisible, and so you move through them and avoid a lot of danger.
Without activating them.
But you yourself, the hobbit that does that, has to roll the threat die on yourself. And that brings us to the other point, the corruption track. So you've got Sauron on one side, and you've got the hobbits on the other side, and they're converging upon each other. So every time you put the ring on, you're moving closer to Sauron, right? And so you're trying to pass the ring to somebody else, and he's bearing down on you. I thought that was pretty well done.
Yeah, absolutely. Just neat. In some of the areas, we would say to the ring bearer player, well, hey, maybe on your turn, if we could get the track up to there right before that double threat die roll, you could just roll the threat die 1 time instead of 3 times.
And then we move through there.
And then we move through there, and maybe we'll get out, that sort of thing.
Yep.
I just thought that was fun.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the level of cooperation, because it should be noted. The level of cooperation required to be successful in this game is high.
Yes.
You will get smoked in this game if you are not on target at all times and you have understanding of what's going on the board. I'll talk more about this later in cons, actually, but you have to constantly be communicating with each other what you can do, how far you can move something, what special items you have. If you are not relaying that information to each other, you have no chance.
Right.
No chance of making it to the end.
Yeah, I agree. This is a hard cooperative game.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I think it's a success of a co-op game when it can beat you multiple times and your first thought is, do we have enough time to run it back? Right?
We tried a few times, that's for sure.
And I mean, I still feel like that about this game. And maybe that's because it's like, well, I haven't won yet. But I also have a feeling like if we won, I probably would still want to keep playing it.
Awesome. So some good things for sure. Things we didn't like. I've got a couple.
Okay.
All right. And I'll be interested to hear what you thought about this as well. I think the story tiles have to be mentioned. So there's this mechanic in the game where at the start of your turn, you have to draw a tile. It's just totally blind. And if you draw a bad one, something bad happens to you. And it can be real bad. Like real bad. And that's when you call on Gandalf to save you. But he can only come so many times, right? You can only use Gandalf so many times. You only have so many legendary cards. And if you hit a run of just drawing bad story tile after bad story tile, you can go from a position of we're doing good to we are screwed.
Right.
In quick order. Just off a random draw.
Yeah.
And man, I don't know. It just felt really punishing to me at times. I was just like, again?
Yeah.
And then we flip over another one, we're like, again? And you could say, well, if you're drawing a lot of bad ones, that means you'll draw a lot of good ones soon too. And that's true. But if you find that in most conflicts, you're drawing a lot of bad ones on the front end, you're going to lose. You want to get out of some of these conflicts quickly without taking too much abuse. If you keep getting pummeled on the front end with bad tile draws, it can just feel brutal.
And when you just rush through encounters because you're getting cracked over the head every turn with those random tile draws, because sometimes they're good, right? Sometimes those random tile draws...
Well, they have to be good for you to start your turn.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Right. You have to draw a good one before you can even do anything.
That may actually be the most devastating rule, and maybe the central problematic rule is the fact that it's not just... I kind of think so. It's not just if you draw one, maybe it's a good thing and nothing bad happens, or maybe it's a bad thing and then you just move on after taking the hit.
Right.
It's
or you can only get hit by it twice, and then you can take a turn. Right. I mean, sometimes it's like 4 times in a row.
Yeah,
you know?
And you don't even start your turn until all the bad stuff is resolved. And usually by the time that you've resolved all the bad stuff, you've hit some of the vertical story track
we need
markers,
to talk about
right?
this. So there's a thing on the edge of the board. So some of the story tiles have hourglasses on them. Right. And there's this little thing along the edge. It's like 6 events that occur during the battle. And it'll say, if your token has not reached this point on this side track, you lose all these special cards. And so you'll start moving down that side track to try to get those before you lose. And the problem with that is, at least I found, most of those ill consequences were like at the very top.
Right.
So somebody would start gunning to try to get those cards before that bad thing hit, and then somebody hit a run of the next person. Right. Only 2 people have taken a turn. And then the next person will draw like 3 bad tiles, and now that thing that person was working for is just poof, gone.
It's gone. And you've wasted the game turns.
Dangles these carrots. It's like the guy with the dollar bill and the fishing pole. He's like, oh, you want this card? You want this card, do you? And you start running after it, and he just pulls it away from you, right? That pissed me off. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. That angered me because I feel like that was happening a lot. Like the game was tricking you with these things that you had a low probability chance of achieving. And I was like, you know what? Let's just get the heck out of here.
I want to say one of them.
Bolt for the
one
exit.
of them is like, I think it's about the AON card. And we actually did do it one time, but the first time that we experienced it, we're like, you're never going to be able to do that. Yeah. Because what happened was
you got to get lucky.
That was the second event down the encounter event.
Yes.
And
it's one of the first things that happens.
And that one, several of the story tiles were bad.
Yes.
And it triggered those events before we could even get to it. And then the next time through it, it was like we just happened to not get those same bad luck tiles until later on the encounter, and we actually completed the track, so we were able to get the AON card and all that. So, yeah, I agree. I think it can be aggressive and feel far too random in that aspect. You want the game to be hard. You want it to be challenging.
Sure,
I mean, maybe there's a difference between hard and challenging.
Couldn't say better yet.
But you want it to be challenging, but you don't want it to be brutal.
Right.
And
I mean, I looked around when this was happening sometime at the table, and everybody just looked dejected.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, ugh.
Well, and I think, like, if you're used to playing cooperative games, you expect there to be the thing on everybody's turn that probably does something bad. Right? And that advances the game, right? If you play the Cthulhu games, like, you know, it's like everyone takes a round. Okay, well, it's Cthulhu's turn. Let's draw the card. And everyone braces and winces. Oh, what's going to happen now? And who's going to die, you know? Yeah. I think that's a given element of any co-op game. So it didn't bother me so much that there were the bad things. The problem was that, that you could get unlucky rather frequently.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's kind of what we're saying.
And you have to prepare for those things. And this goes into my final point. I feel like I have to mention this. And it is a con. So we mentioned those 6 little events that happen in each conflict. I am convinced that in order for you to be successful in this game, everybody has to be acutely aware. I'm not saying memorize, but close. Have an idea of what's coming on those conflict boards to be prepared. Because a lot of the things will say, like, somebody in your group has to discard 2 friendship cards, or you rolled a threat die or something. And so you need to know that is coming to have somebody's hand prepared in such a way to where they can address that.
Right.
But there's like so many of those things.
Yeah.
So there's 4 conflict boards, 6 of those on each board. So that's 24 different things. Again, I'm not saying you have to memorize it, but you need to be aware of it and have some familiarity with it. And I don't know. Are we just going to sit down with these conflict boards before they start and study them like we're studying for a freaking test? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what it feels like you got to do to win this game, because they don't change from game to game. So you just sit down with the boards and you're like, okay, this is going to happen at this time. This is going to happen then. This is going to happen then. So we need to be ready for this. Okay, now let's play.
Yeah.
Like you're studying for it.
Yeah.
That felt weird to me. Rebuttal. Or maybe not. I don't know.
I mean, I think what's interesting is that there are co-op games that you're incentivized to play it multiple times. That part of the fun is getting familiar with it, right?
But it changes.
And trying it again.
Pandemic doesn't play out the same way every time. Sometimes the red cubes are blowing up. Sometimes the black cubes are coming up. Those conflict boards do not change.
Yeah. Are you ready for my real rebuttal?
Okay, I'm ready.
Neither do platform video games.
That is true.
And isn't it fun to try it again and memorize whatever you can memorize and
I guess,
get through it, and then maybe you succeed?
Yeah,
that's the feeling that I get when I play this one.
Because when I play Mega Man, it's all memorization, right? It's never going to change. I know what they're going to do. That's a good point. You know, this might be a good backstage topic at some point. I think that's a philosophical question.
Sure.
Why does that not bother me in a video game? Why does it bother me in a board game? Because I've been programmed in my board gaming mind to think I need to think on my feet. What is the game giving me now? How am I going to respond in this moment? Versus I know it's going to follow this predictable pattern every time. How am I going to increase my probability of winning based on my knowledge of the game? I think it's a good rebuttal.
Yes.
I still think it's a con, but I see your point.
Sure.
I see your point. You want to wrap it up?
I think so. Am I going first, or are you going first on this one?
I'm going first this time. You went first last time.
Perfect.
I'll go ahead and get us started. So it's funny, when we were discussing, you said almost exactly what I had in my notes to say. There's a fine line in a game, particularly a co-op game, between it being challenging and still fun. Co-op games that are not hard and that you just breeze through are not fun.
Right.
You should feel challenged. It should feel tight. It should feel hard. And it should feel good when you win. There's a fine line between that and it feeling punishing, unfair, and just not fun. And unfortunately, for me, this game fell into the latter category. I did not have fun playing this game, and it's a shame because from a thematic standpoint, I feel like the game did pretty good. I was getting into it. I liked how the ring worked. I liked how the character abilities made sense. I was like, yeah, I'm jiving with this, but dang it, man. The story tiles just aggravated the heck out of me. Again, that's where it went from difficult to not fun.
Okay.
And then add to it the fact of the next time we play it, I'm like, well, if we really want to win, all right, you take this conflict board. I'm going to take this one. Let's read through all this stuff. Make sure that we understand what's going to happen. All right, now let's play. Some people might enjoy that. That just feels weird to me in a board game. I have no other way to explain it other than that. So for me, and I will preface this by saying I don't like cooperative games. This is known in our group. I'm not a fan, so you should take that into consideration too. But for me, I didn't like this game. Give it a 2.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't like it. I thought it was bad. I didn't have fun. I got annoyed with the tile draws. I've already made my grievances known, but this just was not what I'm looking for in a co-op. I don't like them anyways, and this one was just like, this is why I hate them.
Okay.
You know, I just didn't enjoy it. So take that for what it's worth. But for me, this one's getting a 2, unfortunately.
All right. Fair enough. That is surprising.
Yeah.
I didn't think you were going to give it stellar numbers, but I didn't expect it to.
I tried to hide it well. We do our best not to give away our thoughts to each other on the show. Sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm like gushing. But, you know, I was like, you know what? I hate this game, but I'm not going to try to drag everybody else down.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll jump in. So for me, I really enjoyed playing this game. And I would say usually when I get my butt kicked out of a game, I don't like it. But I mean, we were playing this at the board game weekend, and we had other games we had to get to. But when we lost, I was like, I want to play this again.
You can't lose again.
I want to try this again. I was having fun. I like the format of the game. I think so many things about it are really cool, and the communication that it inspires between players was really enjoyable for me. I can agree that there may be some problems, and I feel like if I played it several more times and those story tiles kept being an issue in terms of just avalanching a particular encounter, it might cause longer term issues for me. I think that what Reiner Knizia was going for in this is I think what every co-op game is going for, which is a thread the needle victory.
Oh man, yeah. If you win this, you're not going to be like, well, that wasn't close. You're going to get right through the skin of your freaking teeth.
Exactly.
I'm convinced of that.
I think that's what he was going for in the way that he calibrated the game. And I can imagine that winning this game would feel very much the way, like I mentioned, beating a Mega Man boss, right?
Yeah.
Where you have struggled and struggled and struggled and you've blown up and you've died so many times, and you're like, I have to start back at the freaking home menu again. And you just try it again, and you get all the way through it. You're in there and you've died all of your lives except for one, and you finally beat him right at the very end. And you hear the
you got buzzsaw.
Exactly. Metal Man's power, right? I mean, I think that's what he's going for, is if you win this game, you have just threaded the needle, and everyone at the table is like, yes!
That would be true. Yeah.
So, right? I think that's why I like this game. It's because I feel like it's doable, and I really want to experience that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, and I would love to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Sadly, we never experienced that. My
and
only question
is,
is I wonder that if we experience that moment, I can only speak for myself, how much I would be saying, man, we just played an awesome game, or would I be saying, well, we just got really lucky on those story tiles.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because, man, those things will wallop you. I mean, they will wallop you.
Yeah. That's fair. But for me, I'll just wrap up.
Jason would hate this game.
I'll just wrap up my thoughts and just say, I really liked it. I'm really hopeful to play it again and win it.
I respect that. It's a Spiel nominee, so we will play it again.
I'm going to have to give it a 4 only because there are so many games that I think are better, and I think that there's potentially some roughness with the calibration and some luck, like you said.
For sure, yeah.
But for me, I had a lot of fun playing it.
Cool.
I would recommend it to others that like co-op games. It's a solid 4 for me.
I'm glad to hear that, actually, because I remember when we were playing it, I was looking around. I was like, man, is anybody having fun? Because everybody looks so down.
Really? I kind of want to ask everyone else now. We were in Mordor,
and we were getting crushed.
Yeah.
Bill was having a hissy fit.
I thought Eric was having a good time.
I think Eric was having a good time, actually, yeah.
All right. Lord of the Rings, where do you get it?
All right. Good news, there are copies available on Noble Knight as low as $11.
Sweet.
So if you'd like to pick up a copy there, please support our sponsors at Noble Knight Games. If you do, you can use our discount code. That is HGEMS. If you put that in the discount code field, you'll get 10% off your order. So you get $1 off. Woo! But no, seriously, they have a lot of great games at Noble Knight. They're just a great sponsor. We appreciate them. So love it if you could support them.
Yeah, thanks, Noble Knight.
Yeah, if you don't want to pick it up there or it's not available, if people have grabbed it, there are 121 copies available on the BGG Marketplace.
Wow.
Yeah.
121 disappointed customers.
For dirt cheap. And I think that's because this game is just incredibly in print. I mean, they made a ton of this one.
Okay.
So it's just available.
Maybe we should talk to them. Maybe they won. And they don't need to play it anymore.
We're done with this now. I actually went around on BGG, and I was thankful to hear that a lot of people did say they thought it was hard.
Okay.
You know, you're always worried when you go on forums. They're like, well, I don't know why people thought this was hard because this was just so easy for me, you know? And I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever. But most people were like, this is a hard game to win, for sure.
All right. Well,
got nothing else to say.
Well, those are our thoughts on the Lord of the Rings co-op game.
Nice.
It's a time of growing darkness and despair. Sauron the Great, the Dark Lord of Mordor, has returned to his ancient fastness in Barad-dûr. From there, his evil and corruption has spread across the lands once more. Alas, in the west, there is little strength left. The elves have all but abandoned Middle-earth, and the blood of Númenor has run thin. That which remains now dwells in Minas Tirith, or with the lonely rangers that haunt the ruins and wild country of Arnor. Yet, there is still hope. Gandalf the Grey has learned that the One Ring, the Master Ring which Sauron desires and fears above all, is with the hobbit Frodo in the Shire. And there are heroes. Heroes to aid Gandalf in his hunt for the creature Gollum, and in his quest for the lost knowledge of Isildur's bane. Heroes whose strong arms guard the Shire from the enemy. Heroes who venture into the forests of Ithilien, or even into the land of shadow itself, there to disrupt the schemes of Sauron, wherever they may be found.
Middle-earth Quest. We're here, buddy.
We worked hard.
We worked hard on this one, people.
One.
Holy cow. Oh, boy. We'll talk all about this one, but dang. We probably put more work into this review than maybe any.
Yeah, probably.
Because
at least in terms of gaming time.
This is a long sucker. But yeah, you can't accuse Hidden Gems of not putting forth a good effort in a review. Right. Let me tell you, it's not a short one. But anyways, Middle-earth Quest. Pretty epic, though. Published in 2009 by Fantasy Flight Games. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 707. Top 1,000.
Uh-oh.
But old and very much forgotten, which is why it applies, I think. Nobody talks about this game anymore. If people talk about a game like this, they talk about War of the Ring.
Okay.
And there are similarities. Yeah. There are similarities, but there are a lot of differences, too, have played War of the Ring a few times. Mm-hmm. Designers, Corey Konetska, very well known in the hobby. Star Wars Rebellion, Forbidden Stars, Eldritch Horror, Descent, Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. That makes sense. Similar vein for sure. Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Okay. Christian Peterson, founder of Fantasy Flight Games, also co-designer of Twilight Imperium, Warhammer Disc Wars, and Star Wars Armada. If you're familiar with any of these games, it should be giving you an idea of what this game is like, okay?
Okay.
And then Tim Urin, Mythos Tales, Dark Overlord, interestingly, which is a funny game, and some of the Arkham Horror expansions. Okay. Brief rules summary for Middle-earth Quest. I am not even going to come close to going through all the rules in this game. This game has a 40-page rule book, okay? So I'm very much hitting the high spots just to try to get you to understand the general idea of how this game works, okay? All right, Middle-earth Quest.
He still just picked up like 4 pages of notes.
It's 3. Is an epic, large-scale one versus many. So take note of that. This is a one versus many game where one player takes on the role of Sauron and the forces of evil, while the other players play as a member of the free peoples of Middle-earth. In order to win the game, either Sauron or the free peoples need to get their story marker to the end of the story track first and have completed their secret mission. That's in an ideal scenario. Now, there are situations where you can get your story marker to the end of the story track and you haven't completed your secret objective. That's okay, but just know at that point the game will enter something along the lines of a showdown where the heroes will have to fight the ring race. I'm not going to go into all the rules surrounding that, but that's kind of like a sudden death tiebreaker. Okay, continuing on. The hero players have a single story marker that will move forward 2 spaces every round. Sauron, on the other hand, has 3 different story markers, and they will each move forward a varying number of spaces depending upon the type of plot cards that Sauron has in play at that point in the game. So the plot cards are the things that Sauron is trying to make work on the board. Once he's achieved those objectives, that particular story marker will begin to advance, and the heroes are trying to foil that plot. Sauron can have 3 active plots at one time. All right, so before I get into more details, I will just again stress and reiterate that this is an asymmetric game, and that means that Sauron's turn looks absolutely and totally different from the hero's turn. They're nothing alike. We're doing 2 totally different things, okay? On Sauron's turn, he will play or discard one of his plot cards, and then he will take his actions. Sauron has 3 different actions to choose from. First, he can add influence tokens to the board. These are these little round markers, and they're important because they give his monster tokens a path to travel upon. They can make locations perilous for certain heroes, depending upon their wisdom stat, and having certain locations of the board have influence in or around them enables Sauron to play plot cards to the board. And again, that's incredibly important for him to get his story markers moving. Second, he can draw new plot and shadow cards, which are basically just nasty cards that do really mean, cruel things to the heroes to annoy them. And then finally, he can mobilize his forces on the board, which lets him either place new monster tokens onto the board, move monster tokens that are already present on the board along paths of influence, or move his minions, and he can also heal his minions. So minions are really strong monsters that have a lot of hit points and can be killed, but Sauron can heal them with an action. Each turn, Sauron can do 2 or 3 actions depending on player count. So in a 3-player game, Sauron only gets 2 actions, whereas in a 3-player game, he gets 3. But he has some limitations. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but basically under those 3 actions, there are 3 different numbers. He'll take a token, he'll cover the leftmost number in that action, which is the most powerful. So take, for example, influence. If I covered up the 6 number under influence, I can place out 6 influence tokens. The next time I do that, I can't do 6 again because it's covered. So I'll do the 5. Then if I wanted to do it again, I could cover the 4. Once I've placed my 4th token in those 3 actions, the previous 3 come off the board, revealing those more powerful actions that I can then do again. So in some ways, you're kind of playing this really weird Euro game where you're trying to control and manipulate the board. Once Sauron has concluded his turn, the players will then draw a number of cards from their character's card deck equal to their fortitude stat. These cards are important to help their characters move around the board and fight in combat. It's also important to understand that a character's deck is his life, literally. If a character ever takes damage and they have no cards left in their hand or their draw deck, they are defeated. When this happens, they will lose an item or favor token. They're transported to the nearest safe haven location on the board, and Sauron's trailing story marker is advanced forward 1 space. All right, so now heroes. At the start of a player's turn, they always have the option to rest. Resting lets the player take all of the cards in their discard piles and shuffle them back into their card deck. Next, a player may play cards to move to adjacent locations, and then, if applicable, explore that location. Exploring encompasses many things, such as interacting with NPC characters like Gandalf to get training, picking up favor tokens, which are important for eliminating plot cards, completing quests, or removing Sauron's plot cards. So I just explained that. Once finished exploring that location, the player is free to move and explore again, as long as they have the cards to do so. Now, lastly, if a player hero's miniature ever comes into contact with a monster token or a minion miniature at a location, a combat will take place. Combat is relatively simple and involves the hero's hand of cards versus the hand of cards drawn from a given monster's card deck. At the start of a combat, a hero player can use their agility stat number to draw more cards and or add to their strength. So I should mention this really quickly. Every card played by the hero and the monsters has a certain amount of effort linked to it. So the harder a card hits, the more strength it requires. If you ever play cards and the sum of those cards played, the strength number exceeds your strength stat, you are exhausted and you can no longer attack. But the other player, if not exhausted, can continue to attack you, and they will. They will wallop you until you're either defeated or they also become exhausted. Okay? Whenever a hero takes damage, they must discard that many cards from either their hand or their draw pile. And again, if a character ever has to take damage but can't lose cards, he is defeated. And that's where I'm going to stop. There are a lot of other little fiddly bits around event cards, encounter cards, peril cards. There's cards all over the place. There's card piles everywhere. And that's one of the tricky things about this game is learning when you draw those cards, how many you draw, how they execute. A lot of it is very procedural. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to go into any of that. That should give you a good idea of generally how the game plays. Mm-hmm. Did I do a good job?
I think so.
It's a lot of rules. Okay. Same question as before.
You forgot to. That's vaguely how you
that's
play.
Very vaguely. Do not try to play Middle Earth Quest after that explanation. You fail miserably. All right. Epic, grandiose, grand scale Lord of the Rings. How well did you feel like this game captured the Lord of the Rings feeling?
Yeah, So I think the way that I want to answer this question is to suggest that if the Lord of the Rings co-op game paralleled the thematic nature of Lord of the Rings and embodied the theme of Lord of the Rings,
the story,
really, really well, I would say it did so very directly in the sense that you've got named characters from the story,
right? Yep.
Named locations and events occurring in the story. This game kind of embodies more of the ethos of and the philosophy that's going on in the world of Middle Earth, which it's called Middle Earth Quest, and we were talking about it. It's meant to sort of take place sometime between the discovery of Bilbo's ring and the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, something like that. So the characters
happen in close proximity, but
something like that. Yeah,
but you're not following the Fellowship, and I think that's what you're saying. That's important to understand. You are not Frodo and Sam and Boromir.
There are some familiar characters from the world of the Lord of the Rings in the sense that you'll see a Gandalf character that you can interact with. A Saruman character is on the board. And there's even hints at the corruption of Saruman here and there, although it's unclear and not direct. So there's some neat tangential references that if you're familiar with the world of Lord of the Rings, it feels that. But you're not embodying the character of some named person like Boromir, who is also a named character, but you're NPC, not playing as a member of the Fellowship trying to take the ring to Mordor, right? So I think it did a good job in terms of placing you in the world of Middle-earth and challenging you with the political and social turmoil that Middle-earth may have been experiencing leading up to the events of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think you summed it up nicely. I loved looking down on this board. We mentioned earlier my love of maps.
Yeah.
I love fantasy maps.
Yeah.
And this is one of those double board maps where you've got two full-size game boards laying next to each other. It's huge.
Huge.
Totally accurate, cool-looking map of Middle-earth. And when we play this, everybody should know I played as Sauron every time. You feel godlike. Really, honestly, like you're kind of putting your finger down in these areas and you're just manipulating Middle Earth. It was cool in that regard.
I appreciated that they used a lot of recognizable and true to the tale names of the places. Yeah. Because there's a ton of different locations. Yeah, and these are only tangentially mentioned in Lord of the Rings books, but they're more mentioned in the Silmarillion and some of those other places because the events of the story don't really happen there. They're just on the map, right?
Right, exactly.
So that's pretty cool too. And also each location has an image associated with it that represents that. And I thought it was really cool because they've clearly drawn on a lot of the concept art that has been done over the years in reference to Lord of the Rings.
That's funny. I thought I was the only one that was looking in those bubbles. But I was looking at all those artworks. I was like, oh, this place is cool. What does this place look like? You know? Yeah. I agree with you with the characters. I think there was a little bit of a disconnect, although I never played the hero side. It was maybe a little bit of a bummer to see you all playing as made-up, unnamed ranger person who's part of the Free Peoples, because I just found that I never really felt invested in your characters because they didn't feel like somebody that I knew. You know, like when you played Lord of the Rings Confrontation, when Boromir does something, it feels like Boromir because he dies. You know what I mean? Or like when the ring wraiths move, they fly. Yeah. You know, like, cool, that's the ring wraith. That makes sense, right? But on this one, it was just kind of like these people moving around, and I was like not really connecting with them.
Yeah, I would say that if you're still speaking to theme,
I am.
The way that the characters' attributes are calibrated, I think, matches them.
Yeah, and I get that. I guess the point I'm making is, you know, like in War of the Ring, you've never played War of the Ring, but you'll understand what I'm saying. You see Sam and Frodo moving with the ring toward Mordor.
Right.
That's just not happening in this game.
Yeah, it's definitely
if
less
you're looking for like the Fellowship, it's not really here. It's things that other people are kind of doing in the background of that.
Or might have done.
Or might have been doing, right? And so it's a little different. One other thing I have to mention because I thought this was so cool. I mentioned it's a one versus mini game. You know, in a lot of cases in these one versus mini games, the team will be like, hey, can you step away for a minute? Or they'll go off to another room and they'll like secretly chat about their strategy and then they'll come back to the table. In this game, you must talk about everything that you're doing in front of Sauron because Sauron has eyes everywhere. Yeah. And it specifically says that in the rule book. And I thought that was highly thematic. There's nothing you can hide from me. you have to be secretive, almost talking in code if you're trying to communicate with each other and trying to discuss something that you don't want me to know about, like your secret objective or something.
Yeah, and interestingly, because of that, a lot of times we found ourselves not communicating. And it's like, I'm going to hope that my teammate makes some conclusions about what I'm doing because of where I'm going and what I'm trying to do and that
what
sort
you
of thing.
Communally know.
Because if you start table talking, you're like, okay, so why don't you go down there and pick up that thing and talk to that guy?
We definitely need that.
We're just telling you what you're doing and that you should go over there and try to stop us, right? I thought it was an interesting element because there is that sort of paranoia that you feel in the world of Middle Earth, in the books, especially of Corbane from Dunlop.
Yeah, I was going to say, I felt like my Corbane were everywhere.
He has spies everywhere, you know?
Yeah, that was cool.
So, yeah.
All right. Enough theme. So what did you like most about playing as a hero character?
Okay, so I think the first thing that comes to mind for sure is this idea of the way everything centers around your character's deck of cards.
Yes.
Okay? It's your life points. It's your sword in combat. It's your travel rations, right? Because you're spending them to move around the map. It's really neat how the designer of the game managed to pack in all of these features into this one deck mechanism. And I think we can go ahead and talk about this right now. Combat
let's just go for it.
Is really interesting in this game. So the makeup of one of your cards in this deck is you've got a number at the top, sort of a thematic name, maybe 0 to 4 shields, which would represent your defense points. And then some card text.
Some ability.
Explains some benefit that it confers. It's so interesting because the text on these cards is written in such a way, and for that matter, the names of them are themed in such a way that it feels like sword fighting.
There's definitely a component, and I say this cautiously, I've been very critical of this in the past. There's definitely a rock, paper, scissors element to this. If you can guess that somebody's going to play a ranged card and you play a card that says cancel ranged card, you're trying to guess when they're going to play those cards that might cancel my cards. But the thing I did like about it is it's rock, paper, scissors with some information.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows your deck distribution. So there's this little ring of circles that basically tells you, all right, in my combat deck, for every 4 melee cards I have, I only have 1 ranged card. So you know that I've got many more melee than ranged. So you try to use that to your advantage.
Right.
And maybe I'm thinking, well, he probably thinks I'm going to play a melee, so maybe I play a range now. You know, and so you're kind of playing those head games.
If you've been listening to the show for a while, the hoity-toity.
Yeah, the hoity-toity mechanism
is what we call that. It's like that he thinks that I think that he thinks that he knows that I'm going to play this one, you know?
Yeah.
Basically, you're just guessing.
Or maybe I just play a high damage card and just try to whack him, you know?
Right.
But even that's risky because you could go out and they might be like, I canceled this card, you know? So there's always a little bit of danger.
You can also do stuff like if you play a card down and it says on your next turn +2 defense or something like that. So you can adjust your own stats based on the card that you play.
Definitely.
So there's some really neat opportunities going on in just combat itself.
Cool. So for me, I would say there are a lot of things I could talk about. I'm just going to try to focus on one. I definitely felt playing as Sauron, at least, a lot of tension. Always good for me. If you're a long-time listener, you know I love that word. I probably overuse it, but it's a key point for me. I'm always looking for it. Do I feel nervous? Do I feel like I'm having a hard time making a choice? And this game definitely puts you in that position because there's so many things you want to do on your turn. So many. But you might be saying, well, you said you only had 3 actions to choose from and you can do 2 actions. And that is true. But you can hit the same action twice, which in some cases makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you're thinking, man, but I'm not drawing cards and I really need to draw another card. Or you're thinking, man, I really need to move this minion over here so he can block this path, discourage people going from here. But if I do that, then I don't have an action to do this. The whole game, when you're playing as Sauron, you're just suffering and struggling through this like, well, I guess I'm going to do these 2 things, but I really need to do this other thing. And you're trying to decide what's best. Great. Always good. Always good. I could go into more detail, but I think I'd probably just be going too deep down a hole that I probably don't need to go down. I think that makes the point.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that. thoroughly.
Okay.
So, mention some things we like. What was something that you didn't particularly enjoy about the game, experiencing it from the hero side?
So, this may be just related to the fact that this is an epic style game, but this game is really long.
Yeah, it is.
Even at 3 players, which means you shouldn't necessarily be waiting for ages to get back to your turn. But this game is really long.
Yeah. Like, don't play this at 4 players. We did it one time. That was a mistake.
I mean, the first play between learning this game and playing it, it took 5.5 hours.
Yes.
We literally spent more than half a day of our board game retreat playing this game for the first time. And we did it with 4, and it just took ages, especially if anybody gets analysis paralysis on like what to do on their turn. It's just like, wow, it takes a long time. I mean, even our third play, which was people that already knew how to play the game, it still took like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, almost 3. Yeah,
right. It's like you could watch you could watch a Lord of the Rings movie in the time it takes to play this game one time. So that's always kind of a rub, especially when anytime you have gaming time, it's a premium, right? So you're like, well, what else could I be playing, and would I enjoy it more than this?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that segues into a nice point I wanted to make that I think you'll have thoughts on. So again, it's a 40-page rule book. Okay. But this game is actually not hard to play.
Right.
Your turn, to be quite honest, as a hero, is one of the easier things you'll do in board games. I mean, it's not hard.
Right.
You discard cards, you move, you interact in the space, and then you discard cards and you move. And then combat is just simultaneous reveal. Very simple. Sauron's turn is maybe slightly more complicated, but really it's not either. What gets you in this game is there's just so many little fiddly bits all over the place. It's like, okay, now we're in the story phase. What is that? Oh, okay. Draw 3 cards from this deck. Well, which one do we pick? Oh, well, if it matches the location you're in, that's the card you draw. Well, what if these 2 cards match the location? Oh, well, it's the lower number of the... It's just like, oh my God. You know, like, there's just so many little things that you have to know and memorize.
Yeah.
And that you're probably going to screw up. Just all these little fiddly rules. How many of these cards do I draw? When do I draw them? Invariably, somebody's going to be like, oh, I forgot to draw my encounter card when I was over here. And that stuff is constant. And because of that, because of the fiddly bits, you can just run into situations in this game where you're like, I didn't know that could happen. Or I didn't know I could do that.
Yeah.
Like, for example, in the first game we played of this, the characters, the heroes, were trying to avoid corruption, but they didn't know, because they had never played before, that havens are great ways to get rid of corruption.
Yeah.
But they were using all their favor tokens to clear corruption, which they need to get rid of my plots, and they got killed.
And it was our final mission for the game.
Right. So they got hammered.
Yeah.
Well, then we played it a second time.
And we were miserable the whole time.
Yeah, right. And y'all were sad and complaining and griping and upset. Then we played a second time, and I didn't realize... that if you bum rush a stronghold of mine and knock its influence down, all the influence that radiates out from there gets knocked down to 1, which destroyed me.
Yeah.
And then I got my butt kicked, and I was complaining and whining the whole time. So the point I'm making is, before you get into good plays of this, you could have bad plays of this just because you don't understand what can happen to you. And there's just so many little fiddly bits that you could just get walloped.
Yeah.
And so I think that you should know that before you play this game.
I mean, another example, I got myself into a situation where, because, again, of the fiddly bits, like, oh, you can't rest when you're in a stronghold. So,
right.
So I basically took what I thought was a strong move and a risk to go into an area that allowed me to complete a quest, Barad-dûr for that matter, and... not realizing and not
Heart of Mordor.
And not knowing that, oh, I can't actually rest and get my cards back. Yeah. And so instead of...
You were hosed at that point.
That move cost me 3 turns.
Yeah. And y'all lost because of that.
And essentially, by my 3rd turn out of 6 in the game, I was done. I didn't even take any more turns.
Yeah. And had you known that, you wouldn't have done that, and it probably would have been a close game. And that's you're making the point I was making is you can just step in it in this game and you can be like, oh, well, shoot. I just lost the game.
There was a moment in that game where I was going, okay, our first one was a flop to Chris's advantage. The second one was a flop to our advantage. I'm kind of feeling a lot of tension in this one.
Yeah.
And maybe Chris has got his thing going and maybe we have our thing going.
And it was tight to that point.
And there's some good push and shove. And are we going to have our first really good game here? And it ended up just not working because one of us made a freaking mistake. And you don't want to have to get into like retcon. You're like, oh,
right.
Well, could we go back to where I didn't actually do that?
It would have been a lot of undoing.
Now I'm
at that
allowed
point,
to draw cards, and it's like, okay, well,
I felt bad for you though.
We just wasted more time, and it's not wasted like, oh, you didn't actually win. No, you definitely won because I made a stupid mistake. So have we yet played? It's almost like the same feeling that we got the first few times we were playing Mixed Tour, where you're like, okay, every play of this game has ended because one player or another made a silly mistake.
Right.
So have we actually ever really played this game to full effect? Can we really give honest opinions about this game if every game ends in a flub because of a missed rule?
I think you can certainly get to that point in this game. The question is
it worth it?
Are you willing to play that many long sessions to get there? I absolutely think you can, but like
we've got
Cameron
15
said,
hours in this game.
It's a long game.
Not quite.
Yeah, it's a long game.
Yeah.
We've only going to play it twice.
A whole watch of all the Lord of the Rings movies in at this point in terms of time investment. Is it worth it for this particular game?
Yeah.
To me, that's kind of the big question.
Well, I'm dying to hear the answer. That's a good segue if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, I think
Let's
so.
go. Let's hear it. Final
so.
thoughts. What do you think?
I mean, honestly, I thought about this game a lot. And
oh my gosh, this
game
has been on my mind constantly for the last week.
And it's one of those things when you've put that much time into playing a game and thinking about it and asking the question, what's my rating for this game? Am I going to give it a good rating or a bad rating? Do I have positive thoughts or negative thoughts? And I kind of have both, right? Was it outright agony? Well, the first one was. But anytime you feel like you're getting kicked while you're down, you feel like that. But is it worth the investment of more time? Because I feel like I'm still not there to decide if I think this is a good game. I'm done. Like,
okay.
I don't need to know at this point.
Is that mostly from the length?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, I think there's some neat stuff going on. I think that there's some neat push or pull. But in the end, I also found that what I expected was not what I got out of this game, right? I thought that this game was going to be very questy. How quickly can you get your quests done? And
a lot of fighting.
Yeah, and a lot of fighting. Basically, we're the fellowship type people, and we're out to kick up as much dust as we can and put out fires and stuff like that. And it's like, not really. I mean, the putting out fires is actually rather simple and extremely grueling because you have to go around and freaking collect all this favor from here and there and talk to these people and go over there and avoid the monsters. And then every 2 seconds, Chris is like, oh, actually, you just picked up another curse because you entered a periled region. And
well, actually, let me play my shadow card on you.
Play a shadow card on you, and you're now going to discard half the cards in your hand. And I'm
going to attack you with my flock of kerbangs.
Yeah, so basically, and it's not even like fighting, for example, as neat as the mechanism is, it's not even necessary. We played our whole second game without a single combat.
We did, which was not a good sign.
So I think I thought
the game didn't incentivize it, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought from the outset that it was going to be, we're sort of chipping away at things and you can pick a target and go knock it out like a World of Warcraft style where you can level up your stuff because you completed quests, and it's not that at all.
Yeah. It's really more a game of maneuvering.
It's all... Yeah, maneuvering.
Efficiently getting around the board without stepping in it, basically.
Well, and ultimately, I mean, the high-level game is hindering your opponent.
Yes.
Right? Everything that you should be doing as a Middle-earth person is, what can I do to slow down Sauron's progress? Right? To go in, wherever the flags are that are moving the little dials ahead, can I stop them as quickly as possible while avoiding combat and staying as close as I can to places that I can rest? That's it. That's all you should be trying to do. Nothing else matters. You don't need to kill the dudes. You don't need to fight monsters. You need to keep the flags from moving forward, and Sauron's job is keep you from knocking down the flags.
Right.
It's capture the flag.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
And that was disappointing to me.
Yeah.
I know this is a long final thoughts, but that was disappointing to me. I wanted it to be World of Warcraft, and it's Capture the Flag. It's 4-hour long Capture the Flag. So I can't even land on a 3 for this one. I'm so sorry.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm giving it a 2. I just didn't feel like with all the investment that we put into it and all that we wanted this game to be, that it's even any of that. Even when we actually finally understand what it's mainly about, I just don't. I think it's bait and switch, and it wasn't satisfying to me. And honestly, even when I won, I mean, I made probably the best move that I could possibly have made. I mean, literally, it's like turn 3 in the game that we beat Chris. It's like turn 3. I literally had so much synergy. There was a flag there that was moving up one of Sauron's things, like 2 spaces away from Barad-dûr, which was my advanced quest for my person. So I went in there, I took out the flag, I completed my advanced quest, I got a bunch of favor, and then Chris is like, I think something else is supposed to happen. I didn't know about this. So that even deflated me because I was like, cool, the best thing about this move that I just made, I don't get credit for it is what I mean.
Right.
Because Chris was like, actually, all the influence on the board wipes out.
And you just
destroyed my game. And I'm like, oh, I did? Like... So it's like, okay, I feel great about my move, and I did make the move, and it was bold because I endured, I think at the time, like 3 peril cards in a row, back to back, in order to do it, and I felt good about that, but I didn't even know that I was doing the awesome thing that I was actually doing, which was taking out everything that you had set up for the beginning of the game. So all that to say, this like 5-minute diatribe on my final thoughts for this game
about the game too.
Is why I normally write my thoughts down. But yeah, I've got to give it a 2. I don't like it. I would even caution people from playing it unless you just really want to play Lord of the Rings Capture the Flag. I just didn't like it.
Okay, that's funny. All right. How do I follow this one? So you say you want to play Middle Earth Quest, eh? I would agree with Cameron. Proceed with extreme caution. I think in some ways, as we mentioned, the game can be quite fragile. I think the potential of having interesting games is there.
Yeah.
I think the potential of having a really bad experience is also there because we did 2.5 times. I wouldn't call our last game a bad experience because, like Cameron said, it was tracking in a good direction for the majority of the game. And then there was just one little misstep that kind of took it off the rails a little bit. I'd imagine if we played it more, we would have better and better games of this. But again, the question you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to make that investment? And I would say a lot of people are, because there are a lot of games like this. Like Nemesis would be a great example of this. Is a game that is fragile as heck. It's long, it's fiddly, convoluted, but it can tell an interesting story, and you could have an awesome game or you could have an absolutely terrible game of it. This game is like that. So if you understand how Nemesis is, it is like that. Okay, now, did I like the game? Yes, I did like the game. This game was weird. I walked away from this game some days angry at it. And then I would be thinking about it for a few days. And I even texted Karen. I was like, Karen, we have to play again. You know what I'm saying? I did. I was like,
it was bugging you.
I was like, I can't stop thinking about this game because I kept thinking about all the things that I could do better. And even after playing tonight, I kind of want to play again because I was like, man, I just realized something else that I could do better. And so for me, I felt like my experience in playing it was getting better. Now, having said all that, again, you just have to be aware of the pitfalls, as we've already mentioned. I won't rehash them. I think if you like games like this, if you like War of the Ring, if you like Twilight Imperium, if you like Nemesis, you'll probably like this game. Having only played as Sauron, I really enjoyed putting the heroes in tough spots and seeing them try to work their way out. Planning my minions in such a way where I'm like, well, if you want to get rid of that plot, you're going to have to run through the mouth of Sauron. Have fun doing that and just forcing them into making tough decisions. Unfortunately, sometimes those tough decisions can lead to maybe the game ending in a less than fun way, but I liked it. I'm going to give it a 4. I will play it again. I actually kind of want to play it again soon. Hopefully Bill will play it or something, because I don't know. There's just more things
you might get Eric in on more.
There's more things I want to try, and I think this game kind of has that going for it. So I'll stop there. There's so much we could talk about with this game. We talked about this game a ton. We really did. Hopefully we did the review justice, or we were kind of all over the place, but there's just a lot to say about it, honestly.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll ask you the same question. Might be folks out there that want to check it out.
Yeah.
Where do they get it?
Well, this one is kind of rare. If you want to pick it up, probably would recommend you try getting it on BGG. The copies there are around $80 to $100. So again, proceed with caution. I'm sure you could resell it if you wanted to, but it's going to be a high cost to get in. But part of the reason why it's so high too is this is a big game. This is a big box game. This is like a Twilight Imperium kind of size. Not that big, but approaching it. So there's a lot of components, a lot of bits. The board is big. It's epic. It's not a $45 game. Okay.
All right.
So yeah, if you want to pick it up on BGG, you can get it.
There you go. Well, those are our thoughts on Middle-earth Quest. Well, thank you for joining us for this Lord of the Rings themed episode of Hidden Gems. If you like what we're doing here, please remember it's a huge help to us if you'd leave us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice and follow us on our various social media accounts. Those simple things can make a big difference for the show's exposure so more folks can enjoy exploring games with us. Check out the BGG Guild if you want to interact with us or share a game that you think is a hidden gem. And if you're so inclined, consider supporting the show over at patreon.com/hiddengemspodcast. That'll let you check out all the backstage episodes that we're putting out these days. You could also go to hiddengemsboardgamepodcast.com/store. Get yourself a t-shirt or a hat. We do have hats. No one's gotten a hat yet, but Chris and I are wearing ours and we love them.
Both got them on.
And until next time, I'm your host, Cameron.
And this is Chris.
Thanks for listening. This episode of Hidden Gems, number 47, was recorded in Raleigh, North Carolina on January 29, 2023. It's time for another designer spotlight. Join us again in 3 weeks as we revisit one of Chris's all-time favorite designers, Stefan Dora, and review 3 more games from his design catalog. Will Chris dish out even more sixes for Dora? Tune in to find out. Hidden Gems is produced and edited by Chris Alley, Cameron Lockey, and Jason Yanchuleff. Our Board Game Geek Guild is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Ghidorah. Our Discord channel is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Snoozefest. Our show's logo was illustrated by designer and artist Caitlin Nieto. Check out her work on Instagram at It's Caitlin Nieto. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to join the discussion on our many social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at Hidden Gems Board Game Podcast, Instagram at hiddengems.podcast, and Twitter at Hidden Gems Board. Disagree with one of our reviews? Have something you want to say about one of the games we discussed today? You can also make your voice heard on our Board Game Geek Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, guild number 3874. Once again, thank you for joining us on Hidden Gems, and until next time, fellow gem seekers, enjoy your games and enjoy your search.